The light within the obsidian spire was ancient, a cold, filtered luminescence that had seen the rise and fall of empires before the Cathar dominion had even conceived of itself. It bled through vast, crystalline walls, casting long, distorted shadows of the figures gathered around the central dais. Here, at the heart of their power, the High Council convened, their carapaces gleaming like polished jet, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the star charts that swam in the air between them. Silence, heavy and ritualized, was the preferred mode of communication, broken only by pronouncements of immense gravity. Today, that silence felt different. It was not the quiet of contemplation, but the stillness of a predator holding its breath. High Adjudicator Vorlag felt the wrongness of it in the subtle vibrations of the spire's foundational crystal. He watched High General Kalen, his massive frame rigid with contempt, as the general gestured a bladed forelimb toward a flickering glyph in the holographic display. The glyph represented a species, a newcomer to this spiral arm of the galaxy, humanity. A single colony, Kalen's voice was a low grinding of chitin, a sound meant to convey authority and dismissiveness in equal measure. A peripheral settlement of no strategic value on a world they named Veridia. Its loss is a triviality. The actions of the rogue warlord Grakthul are a matter of internal dominion discipline, not a catalyst for interspecies conflict. The aged imperator, his carapace grayed and etched with the lines of millennia, shifted his weight. The movement was barely perceptible, yet it sent ripples of deference through the assembled council members. The dishonor, High General, is not trivial. Grakthul acted outside the mandate of conquest. He brought ruin to a fledgling race without a formal declaration of grievance. He has stained the Dominion's name with the mark of a common marauder. Vorlag kept his own counsel, his gaze fixed on the human glyph. It was simple, unassuming, a plain circle with a cross. It lacked the ornate, aggressive symbology of the other galactic powers. It seemed quiet, deceptively so. For 3 standard cycles, since the news of Veridia's fall had reached them, the humans had done nothing. There had been no frantic diplomatic entreaties, no saber-rattling on the hyperwave frequencies, no fleets massing at the border. There had only been silence. A profound, absolute silence that felt heavier and more menacing than any threat. Grakthul will be brought to heel and judged according to our laws, Kalen insisted, his mandibles clicking with irritation. A reprimand will be sent to the humans, perhaps a token offering of resources to compensate for their loss. They are a young species, barely spacefaring for a few of our generations. They will understand the complexities of managing a vast and sometimes unruly empire. They will be grateful for our magnanimity. Vorlag finally spoke, his own voice smoother, less abrasive than the general's, yet it cut through the chamber's atmosphere with a chilling resonance. You assume they think as we do, High General. You assume their concept of justice aligns with our code of honor. We have studied the fragmented data we possess on this species. They do not operate on principles of honor or glory. Their societal structures are built upon abstract concepts they call rights and laws that they believe to be universal. Meaningless semantics, Kalen rasped. Every species believes their way is the only way until they are shown otherwise by superior strength. And what if their silence is not the paralysis of fear but the quiet of deliberation? Vorlag pressed, turning his multifaceted gaze toward the Imperator. What if they are not preparing a plea but a judgment of their own? We extinguished one of their nascent worlds. We have no frame of reference for their response to such a transgression because, by all accounts, no one has ever done it before. They have known conflict, yes, but only amongst themselves. We are their first external existential threat. We are the first to show them true galactic malice. A low murmur rippled through the council. Vorlag's words touched upon a deep-seated uncertainty that the Dominion's bluster was designed to conceal. They were old, powerful, and their ways were set in stone. The humans were an unknown variable, a chaotic element introduced into a system that had been in equilibrium for eons. Their expansion had been strangely peaceful. They settled worlds deemed uninhabitable by others, terraforming with a speed and efficiency that was unsettling. They did not conquer, they assimilated empty space, until now. The Imperator's ancient head tilted. Your point is noted, High Adjudicator. You counsel caution. What form of response do you anticipate? Vorlag hesitated, the star charts swirling around him seeming to mock his inability to provide a concrete answer. That is the source of my disquiet, Your Majesty. I do not know. Their psychology is alien. I have reviewed the final transmission from Veridia. It was not a plea for help. It was not a cry of defiance. It was a report. Calm, methodical, detailing the composition of Grakthul's fleet, the trajectory of his orbital bombardment, the estimated time until atmospheric collapse. The final words were not a fear, but a simple statement. Protocol 7 invoked. The record is sealed. It was as if they were dispassionately documenting their own extinction for some future archivist. The chamber fell silent again. The image Vorlag painted was deeply unnerving. The Cathar met death with a roar of glorious battle. To face it with the cold detachment of a scribe was a thing of utter foreignness. It suggested a mindset that was not emotional, but procedural. A species of clerks and bureaucrats, Kalen sneered, though the sound lacked its earlier conviction. They will drown us in paperwork, then. I shall prepare the legions for a potential border skirmish, but I anticipate nothing more than a strongly worded diplomatic protest. And so the council concluded. The matter was tabled, relegated to a question of internal discipline and minor diplomatic appeasement. Kalen departed to rattle his metaphorical sabers. The other counselors dispersed to attend to the vast machinery of the Dominion, and the Imperator retreated into his silent contemplation. Only Vorlag remained, standing alone in the heart of the spire, his gaze still fixed on the simple, silent glyph of humanity. He felt a cold dread coalesce within his primary consciousness. The Cathar believed the universe operated on the principles of power, honor, and territory. They understood the roar of a fleet emerging from hyperspace, the glorious detonation of a warship's core, the submission of a conquered world. They did not understand the power of a quiet, methodical, and unified response. They did not understand what happened when a species of clerks decided a debt was due. The silence from the human sphere of influence continued, stretching from days into a week, then 2. It was a perfect, unbroken void of communication. The Cathar listening posts among the most sensitive in the galaxy heard nothing. No military chatter, no civilian panic, no political debates. Just nothing. The silence itself became a presence, a living entity that pressed against the Dominion's borders with an immense, unspoken weight. In his private chambers, Vorlag immersed himself in every scrap of information the Dominion possessed on humanity. It was precious little. They were a species of profound contradictions. They broadcast art and music of heartbreaking beauty and mathematical complexity, yet their history was a litany of self-inflicted violence that made the Cathar's most brutal conquests seem restrained. They spoke of peace and unity, yet they had perfected the art of war against themselves to a terrifying degree. They were sentimental, forming deep emotional bonds, yet they could be ruthlessly logical when prosecuting their goals. He studied their technological signatures. Unlike the crystalline, semi-organic technology of the Cathar, which was grown and sung into existence, human technology was stark, efficient, forged. It was a technology of brute force physics, of manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe with a directness the Cathar found crude, yet undeniably effective. There were whispers from long-range scout reports of human vessels that did not travel through hyperspace but simply arrived. One moment a sector was empty, the next a human ship was there, its energy signature a placid, stable hum. It was dismissed as sensor ghosts or anomalies. Vorlag was no longer so sure. The disquiet in his soul solidified into a near certainty. The Cathar had not poked a beast of honor that would roar in response. They had disturbed something more akin to a force of nature. They had broken a law of a system they did not comprehend, and the system was now preparing to correct the imbalance. The notification came without warning. Not a transmission, not a hail, but a sudden, jarring reality. A single vessel, infinitesimally small against the grand scale of the Dominion's capital system, had appeared in high orbit over their homeworld, Cathar. It had not emerged from a hyperspace rift. It had not decelerated from faster-than-light travel. It simply existed where a moment before there had been only the void. The system defense grid screamed alerts, its automated systems unable to classify the vessel's method of arrival or its impossibly stable energy signature. It sat in perfect geosynchronous orbit over the obsidian spire, a silent, solitary sentinel. High General Kalen's rage was immediate and explosive. Unacceptable, a violation of our sovereignty, shoot it down. It is a scout, a probe, an insult. But the Imperator, for the first time in a century, countermanded a direct order from High General in open council. Hold, it has made no hostile move, it is not shielded, it is broadcasting nothing, it is waiting. Vorlag watched the tactical display, his heart cycling with a slow, heavy rhythm. The human ship was a sliver of dark metal, impossibly sleek and featureless. It absorbed all sensor scans, returning no data. It was a hole in the fabric of space, a physical manifestation of the silence they had endured for weeks. Then a transmission opened, not on military channels but on the primary diplomatic frequency. The signal was clean, unencrypted, and carried a simple, repeating message in flawless, unaccented Cathar. An emissary of the Terran Alliance requests an audience with the governing body of the Cathar Dominion. We await your designation of a time and place. We will wait. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They had not asked for permission to enter the system. They had not identified themselves upon arrival. They had simply appeared in the most secure space in the entire Dominion and then, with unnerving politeness, requested a meeting. It was not the act of a petitioner. It was the act of an entity that did not for a moment consider the possibility of refusal. They mock us, Kalen thundered. This is a test of our resolve, a display of arrogance. Or a display of confidence, Vorlag countered, his voice low and steady. They are so certain of their position that they feel no need for aggression or subterfuge. They have come to talk, and they expect us to listen. The Imperator's gaze fell upon Vorlag. High Adjudicator, you have counseled caution and understanding. You will be the one to meet this emissary. You will descend to the Grand Chamber of First Contact, and you will hear what this human has to say. Learn what drives them. Learn the price of their silence. Vorlag bowed his head in acceptance, a strange sense of fatalism washing over him. The game of empires he had known his entire life, a game of feints, threats, and glorious combat, was over. A new game was beginning, with rules he did not yet understand. He was about to meet a player from a species that had perfected the art of silent calculation, a species that had just lost a world and had responded not with a scream of rage, but with a single, polite request for a conversation. And as he prepared to meet the human, Vorlag could not shake the feeling that this conversation would not be a negotiation, but the calm, quiet reading of a sentence that had already been passed. The Grand Chamber of First Contact was a cavernous space, designed to intimidate. Its walls were woven from living crystal that pulsed with the slow, rhythmic light of a captive nebula. The air was thick with the scent of ionized ozone and ancient stone, an atmosphere curated over millennia to project an aura of unassailable power and permanence. Statues of the Dominion's greatest conquerors, their bladed limbs poised for eternal battle, lined the processional way. It was a room that had humbled ambassadors from 100 different species. When the human emissary entered, he seemed not to notice. He was unimpressive, a bipedal creature, soft-skinned and frail-looking in a simple dark gray garment that had no apparent function beyond covering his body. He was flanked by 2 Cathar honor guards who towered over him, yet he moved with a placid grace that made the guards seem clumsy and theatrical. He walked to the center of the chamber, stopped before the dais where Vorlag and a select few counselors sat, and inclined his head in a gesture of polite acknowledgement. His face was a mask of calm neutrality, his eyes, a strange, pale blue, surveying the grandeur around him with what seemed to be mild, academic curiosity rather than awe or fear. "I am Ambassador Elias Vance, representing the Terran Alliance," the human said. His voice, translated by a small, almost invisible device near his collar, was as calm and measured as the transmission from his ship. It held no anger, no sorrow, no menace. It was the voice of a man discussing a logistical problem. "I thank you for granting this audience." Vorlag gestured for the honor guards to retreat, leaving the small, soft creature alone on the vast, polished floor. "I am High Adjudicator Vorlag. The Dominion is prepared to hear your grievance concerning the unsanctioned actions of the warlord Grakthul against your colony on Veridia." Ambassador Vance's expression did not change. "There is no grievance to be heard, High Adjudicator. A grievance implies a request for redress. The Terran Alliance is not here to make a request." A ripple of consternation passed through the Cathar delegation. Vorlag felt the chamber's temperature seem to drop by a degree. "Then what is the purpose of your presence, Ambassador?" "I am here to deliver a verdict," Vance stated simply. The word hung in the air, alien and absolute. "The unprovoked annihilation of the Veridia colony, a civilian population of a Cygna. Tory member of the Alliance, constitutes an act of procedural termination against a non-combatant entity. The Cathar Dominion, by failing to contain or discipline the responsible party, Grakthul, has demonstrated an inability or an unwillingness to uphold its sovereign duties as defined by galactic common law regarding rogue military elements. Therefore, the responsibility for enforcement of the consequence now falls to the Terran Alliance." High General Kalen, present against Vorlag's better judgment, let out a harsh, grating laugh. "Consequence? Enforcement? You, a single, unarmed envoy in a single, insignificant ship, speak of enforcement to the Cathar Dominion. Your species has no concept of power. For the first time, a flicker of something moved in Vance's eyes. It was not anger, but perhaps a profound weariness, the look of a teacher explaining a simple concept to a willfully ignorant student for the 1000th time. Power is not the ability to cause destruction, High General. That is mere violence. Power is the ability to control outcomes, to ensure that a specific result is achieved regardless of opposition. We are not here to fight you. A fight implies uncertainty of outcome. We are here to administer a consequence. And what is this consequence? Vorlag asked, his voice low, cutting through Kalen's impending tirade. The entity known as Grakthul, along with his entire military infrastructure, his command staff and his material assets, are to be neutralized and seized. His operations will be dismantled. His person will be taken into Alliance custody to answer for the termination of the Veridia colony, Vance said, his tone as even as if he were reading an inventory list. Kalen slammed a bladed fist onto the balustrade of the dais, cracking the ancient crystal. He is in the Tartarus Nebula, in a fortress of our own design. His fleet is a legend of terror in this quadrant. You would need an armada greater than any seen in this galactic arm to even consider such an assault. Your arrogance is boundless. Arrogance is the belief that a task is beneath you. We view this as a necessary, if regrettable, procedure, Vance replied, unperturbed. As for the required assets, they have already been deployed. Vorlag's blood ran cold. He gestured to the communications officer. Confirm, check all sensor feeds on the Tartarus Nebula, full spectrum analysis. The officer's multifaceted eyes widened in panic as he manipulated his console. The data flooded the main display in the chamber, the star chart zooming in on the roiling, chaotic gases of the nebula where Grakthul had made his lair. For a moment there was nothing. Then, as the sensors resolved the image, a collective gasp went through the Cathar delegation. Kalen froze, his rage evaporating into sheer, uncomprehending disbelief. The Tartarus Nebula was surrounded, encased. A perfect sphere of containment had been formed around the entire celestial body. Countless points of light, each a human vessel, formed a flawless geometric cage of impossible scale. They were not arranged in battle lines or fleets. They were positioned with mathematical precision, creating an inescapable net of overlapping energy fields. The nebula, once a symbol of impenetrable defense, was now a prison. And the number of vessels, it was not a fleet. It was a migration, a nation-state's worth of ships, summoned from nothingness. The Dominion's long-range sensors had detected nothing, no hyperspace wakes, no energy buildup. They had simply appeared, a silent, overwhelming presence that dwarfed the entirety of the Dominion's combined naval forces into insignificance. What is this? Kalen whispered, the grinding authority in his voice replaced by a thread of pure terror. What are those ships? Vance's gaze lifted to the display. Our translation matrices are still imperfect. Your language has no precise analog for what they are. Your sensor networks have been classifying them with a low-fidelity signifier. You have been calling them battle boats. He paused. A more accurate, though still insufficient, term would be verdict enforcement vessels. They are not instruments of war. They are instruments of inevitability. Vorlag stared at the display, mesmerized by the terrible, silent beauty of it. He finally understood. The weeks of silence had not been a period of fear or indecision. It had been the time required for mobilization. The time required for a species of clerks to process an event, cross-reference it with their laws, reach a unanimous decision, and then dispatch the necessary tools to see it carried out. The simplicity of the human glyph, the quiet of their emissary, the plainness of their ships, it was all a lie. Or rather, it was a truth so profound that the Cathar, with their love of pomp and ceremony and glorious battle, could not comprehend it. Humanity did not posture. They did not threaten. They acted. You have caged our space, Vorlag said, the words feeling heavy and useless in his own mouth. You have laid siege to a Dominion system. No, Vance corrected him gently. We have quarantined a disease. Our quarrel is not with the Cathar Dominion. It is with the cancer you have allowed to grow within it. We broadcast on all civilian and military channels within the nebula. Any Dominion vessel not directly sworn to Grakthul has been advised to power down its weapons and engines and await the conclusion of the procedure. They will not be harmed. There will be no collateral damage. The finality of that statement was more terrifying than any declaration of war. Humanity was not here to conquer the Cathar. They were not interested in their territory, their resources, or their honor. They were here on a sanitation mission, a cosmic-scale extermination of a single pest, and they had brought a force so overwhelming that the very concept of resistance was rendered absurd. The Cathar were not even an obstacle to be overcome. They were a background condition to be managed. Vorlag looked from the impossible fleet on the display to the small, soft-spoken man standing before him. In that moment, he saw the true face of human power. It was not the impassioned fury of a warrior. It was the calm, unyielding, and absolute certainty of a judge who had already signed the order of execution. The rest was merely procedure. The Dominion was no longer a participant in this conflict. They had been reduced to the role of horrified spectators. Vorlag sought out Ambassador Vance in the sequestered chambers that had been provided to him. The human was not pacing or communicating with his fleet. He was observing a holographic projection of a Cathar historical text, his expression one of serene curiosity. He looked up as Vorlag entered, his pale blue eyes holding a deep, ancient stillness. "High Adjudicator," Vance said with a slight inclination of his head, "I trust your council is deliberating." "The council is in a state of shock," Vorlag replied, his voice devoid of its usual formality. He stood before the human, foregoing the usual posturing of a Cathar of his station. "They are grappling with the reality that our entire military might is an irrelevance, that you could have scoured our homeworld from existence as easily as you contain the Tartarus Nebula." "And yet we did not," Vance said simply. "That should be the focus of your deliberation. The choice not to act is as significant as the choice to act." "Why?" Vorlag asked, the question raw and unadorned. "Why this overwhelming yet controlled response? By our code, the destruction of a colony would be met with a blood feud, a war of honor that could last for generations. Your response is sterile. It is without passion." Vance gestured to a chair, an offering of equality that was in itself a revolutionary act in Cathar society. Vorlag, after a moment's hesitation, lowered his large frame into it. "Passion is the fire that forged our species, High Adjudicator, and it nearly consumed us. Our history is a chronicle of blood feuds, of wars of honor, of righteous crusades and cycles of vengeance. We learned, through unimaginable loss, that passion is a poor arbiter of justice. It is biased, it is volatile, and it escalates. An eye for an eye, as one of our old laws stated, leaves the whole world blind." He let the words settle in the quiet room. "We evolved. We had to. We codified our existence. We did not abandon emotion. We compartmentalized it. We channeled the outrage over Viridia not into a desire for revenge, but into a demand for balance. A great crime was committed. It created a tear in the fabric of cosmic order. Our purpose is not to punish Grakthul in a fit of rage. It is to mend that tear. The force you see is not an army of revenge. It is a suture on a galactic scale." Vorlag tried to process this. The Cathar concept of justice was intrinsically linked to honor and retribution. A dishonorable act must be met with a response that restores the honor of the aggrieved. This human concept was entirely different. It was impersonal, mathematical. "You speak of balance," Vorlag said, "but the force you have brought it is the definition of imbalance. It is absolute power." "It is a precise application of necessary force," Vance corrected him. "The scale of the tool must match the scale of the problem. Grakthul's fortress and fleet represented a significant logistical and tactical challenge. To ensure a certain outcome with zero collateral damage to Dominion assets and personnel, and to prevent his escape, this is the level of force that was calculated to be necessary. Any less would have introduced variables, chances for error, for escalation. We do not gamble. We solve." Outside the chamber, the Dominion was in chaos. Kalen was arguing for a glorious, suicidal charge against the human fleet, a last stand to preserve the honor of the Cathar military. Others were calling for the immediate branding of Grakthul as a traitor to be handed over. The Imperator was silent, locked in a deep meditation, attempting to reconcile 1,000 millennia of Cathar tradition with the stark new reality that had appeared in their skies. The procedure, as Vance called it, began without fanfare. There was no grand charge, no thunder of energy weapons. From the human vessels, streams of what looked like liquid darkness poured into the nebula. They were not missiles or torpedoes. They were, according to the frantic reports of the Cathar sensor technicians, localized gravitational distortions. They moved with intelligent purpose, flowing around neutral Dominion ships, ignoring civilian outposts. They converged on Grakthul's fleet. The warships of the rogue warlord, the terror of the outer sectors, did not explode. They were simply taken apart. Hulls buckled and warped as microsingularities bloomed and vanished along their spines. Weapon systems were surgically disconnected. Engine cores were encased in stasis fields that froze them at a quantum level. The ships were rendered inert, their crews trapped inside unharmed but utterly helpless. It was less a battle and more a disassembly. Then the human forces turned their attention to Grakthul's primary fortress, an asteroid hollowed out and armed with planet-cracking weaponry. The human vessels projected a coordinated gravity field that gently but irresistibly pulled the asteroid from its orbit. They did not shatter it. They moved it, guiding it into the deep void away from the system's primary star. There, other vessels began to work on it, not with weapons, but with what appeared to be molecular fabrication beams, used in reverse. They unmade it. Layer by layer, the fortress was deconstructed, its raw materials sorted and cataloged by automated drones. Throughout the process, Ambassador Vance remained with Vorlag, providing quiet commentary as if they were observing a complex industrial process. "We are reclaiming the resources used to build his war machine. They will be repurposed. The energy from his weapons will be used to help restore the atmospheric damage to a nearby world he raided years ago. The metals from his ships will be used to construct habitats for the displaced. It is all part of the balancing equation." Vorlag was speechless. This was not war, it was not even justice as he understood it. It was ecological. It was a complete systemic reversal of a destructive act. The humans were not just removing a threat, they were erasing its impact, tidying the cosmos as one might tidy a room. He watched as a small, specialized human ship docked with Grakthul's disabled command vessel. A few moments later, a single life sign was transported aboard. "Grakthul is in our custody," Vance announced calmly. "He will be taken to a secure facility where his memories will be archived for legal record, and then he will be placed in a state of indefinite metabolic suspension. His consciousness will experience no passage of time. It is the most humane method of permanent incarceration we have devised. No glorious execution, no public shaming, just a quiet, efficient removal from existence." The terror of Grakthul had ended not with a bang, but with a simple database entry. As the last of the warlord's assets were neutralized, the massive human fleet began to reconfigure. The perfect sphere of light dissolved, the vessels moving into new, serene formations. There was a sense of finality, of a job completed. The quarantine was over. In the High Council chamber, a profound silence reigned. Kalen stood, his carapace slumped in a posture of defeat, his belief in the supremacy of Cathar military might shattered. The other counselors looked at the display, where the human fleet now waited, placid and silent once more, their work done. The Imperator finally spoke, his ancient voice filled with a new, weary wisdom. "High Adjudicator Vorlag," he said, his gaze finding the Adjudicator. "You were right. We did not understand. We mistook silence for weakness and calmness for fear. We have judged a species by our own standards and found ourselves to be the lesser. Go back to the human. Tell him we have learned." Vorlag returned to Vance's chambers. He did not know what to say. An apology seemed insultingly small. An offer of alliance seemed presumptuous. He settled on the simple truth. "My government understands now," Vorlag began. "We understand that we have narrowly avoided a conflict that would have been our end, not because of your malice, but because of our own ignorance." Vance gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Understanding is the foundation of peace, High Adjudicator. Your Dominion now has a choice: to continue in the old ways, a path of honor-bound conflict and territorial disputes, or to join a larger galactic conversation, one based on mutual respect for sentient existence and adherence to a common set of laws." It was an invitation, an offer to a defeated, humbled empire to join the victor not as a vassal, but as a partner. It was an act of profound, illogical grace. "Why?" Vorlag asked again, the question now carrying a different weight. "Why offer partnership to those who so grievously wronged you and so profoundly misunderstood you?" "Because we did not come here for a new enemy. We came to solve a problem," Vance said. "And the greatest problem in this galaxy is not rogue warlords, it is isolation. It is the belief that each species is alone, that their way is the only way. We have been alone. We know the cost of that belief. The Veridia colony was a tragedy, but if it leads to the Cathar Dominion joining the community of worlds, then their loss will have meaning beyond the simple act of their termination. That is how we honor our dead, High Adjudicator. We build a better future on the foundation of their sacrifice. A new kind of honor, not of battle but of legacy, not of retribution but of progress." A strange, powerful hope began to bloom in Vorlag's mind, a hope for a future he had never dared to imagine. The Cathar were old, but perhaps they were not too old to learn. He was about to formally accept the offer to open diplomatic channels, to begin the long process of integrating his ancient empire into this new galactic paradigm, when a soft chime sounded from the small device on Vance's collar. The ambassador's calm expression shifted for the first time, a subtle furrowing of his brow. He listened for a moment, his blue eyes distant. "Excuse me, High Adjudicator," Vance said, his voice now carrying a new, more urgent tone. He gestured, and a holographic display bloomed in the air between them. It was not a star chart, but a complex waveform analysis, shimmering with data. "What is it?" Vorlag asked. "An anomaly," Vance said, his gaze fixed on the display. "During the deconstruction of Grakthol's fortress, we had to neutralize several experimental temporal distortion weapons he was developing. They created a great deal of subspace noise. Now that the noise has dissipated, my fleet's deep-range sensors are picking something up. A signal buried beneath the quantum foam. It's very old." Vorlag looked at the data, though he could not comprehend its intricacies. He could see one thing, however, a repeating, structured pattern buried within the chaotic lines of background radiation. It was weak, ancient, but unmistakably artificial. "We are cross-referencing it with all known galactic databases," Vance murmured, more to himself than to Vorlag. "The encoding is non-standard. It doesn't match any known species, living or extinct, weight." The display flickered, and a new set of glyphs appeared next to the waveform. They were symbols from Cathar myth, from legends so old they were considered religious fantasy. They were the glyphs of the architects, the fabled first civilization that was said to have built the hyperspace lanes and seeded the galaxy with the building blocks of life before vanishing into eternity. "It cannot be," Vorlag whispered, rising from his chair. "They are a myth, a story told to hatchlings." "Myths are often the echoes of forgotten history," Vance said, his eyes wide with an intensity Vorlag had not seen before. "The signal's point of origin is impossible. It's from the halo region beyond the galactic rim in a sector of space we call the Great Void. And the signal's contents, the translation is rough, but it appears to be a repeating message, a warning." The translated text scrolled across the bottom of the display. The words were simple, stark, and filled with a cosmic dread that transcended language. "Consumes the light, the silence SPREADS. Do not answer, we are become a tomb." It was not a message. It was a distress call, an epitaph broadcast across millions of years from a long-dead civilization, warning of a threat that had consumed them, a threat that came from the absolute darkness between galaxies. Grakthol's temporal weapons, in their chaotic disruption of spacetime, had been masking this faint, desperate cry from the dawn of time. The human procedure had, by sheer accident, uncovered it. Vorlag looked at Vance, and the human looked back. The immense chamber, the ancient spire, the entire Cathar dominion suddenly felt very small, very fragile. The conflict between their two species, the destruction of Veridia, the awe-inspiring display of human power, it was all just a prologue, a footnote in a much larger, much older, and much more terrifying story. The massive human fleet, the 700,000 battle boats that had seemed a terrifying instrument of revenge, was now cast in a new, chilling light. It was not a weapon of retribution. It was a shield, and the universe had just revealed what it was shielding against. "The greatest problem in the galaxy is not rogue warlords," Vance said, his voice a low, somber echo of his earlier words. "It is isolation." In that moment, standing before the ghost of a dead civilization's final cry, a Cathar adjudicator and a human ambassador, former adversaries from opposite ends of the galaxy, understood that their two peoples were not alone after all, and they were in terrible, terrible danger. The real verdict was yet to be delivered, and the whole of the galaxy would be the defendant. A new, grand, and terrifying age had just begun.